In Nigeria today, being an electricity consumer may sometimes mean that you must provide the infrastructure you need to be connected to the national grid or resolve blackouts. There are reports of communities buying electricity infrastructure like poles, transformers and cables, among others. And these infrastructures are then taken over by power distribution companies, which should have provided them without any form of compensation. Now, in this story, Just Nigeria's Ayuba Iliya visited some communities in southwestern Nigeria's Oyo State and Abuja, the Nigerian capital, to hear directly from affected persons and hold concerned authorities to account. Have a look.
There was a time our transformer was overloaded, so we needed to get a new one. So we all contributed 50,000 for it, each household.
Across Nigeria, many communities are taking matters into their own hands to guarantee power connection.
I don't contribute money to buy transformer and I don't contribute money to buy pole.
But when these communities pool resources together to purchase needed power infrastructure, who benefits the most?
When they sign off to us, we take ownership.
If you don't surrender those things to them, they are not likely to connect you to the network.
For many communities across Nigeria, a faulty transformer, a burnt feeder pillar, or stolen cable could mean total blackout for days, months, or even years. In southwestern Oyo State, Abbas Akinwale's community has been without power for 2 months now, despite pooling resources together to replace a broken transformer.
We decide to tax ourselves a house at 50,000 naira by then. Along the line, we are making the project until we reach a final stage that they're supposed to come and power the transformer. So by then, they have to tell us we have to write a letter of donation of that transformer to them so that it can be their property.
This is not a one-off story. Wale's Nwosu's community in Abuja, Nigeria's capital, endured a 5-month power outage caused by a faulty transformer. He says, with the electricity company projecting replacement in 2028, residents resorted to self-help.
We paid a token of 7,000 naira each room to be able to get the transformer. We got in contact with a private sector. He sells transformer. So we met him and he agreed to give us the transformer on credit first, so that we'll go and lighten up the place before people will start contributing to be able to make up with the money. I think it was about like 14 or 15 million naira or thereabout. So of which up till date, the money is still being gathered.
Perennial power cuts and faulty electricity connections are experiences many Nigerians are very familiar with.
Then I'll pay NEPA bill, still come buy a pole stand.
There was nothing free, there was no refund, nothing.
There's no free usage of electricity after the connection of the transmitter.
After contributing money that we are calling, that's where they will tell us that they don't have fuel in their vehicle.
But even after bearing the cost, residents often receive little to no recognition. Instead, the equipment is absorbed by the electricity distribution company. The simple answer to who owns community-funded electricity infrastructure should be who paid for it, but it's not that simple. This document permits communities to invest in electricity infrastructure provided there's a repayment agreement with distribution companies. Such agreements are rare.
Customers are eager to get connected, and the discos themselves are not perhaps telling them that, look, you can have a contract. The discos will not like to pay. They like to take those investments free. So except more education, NEC keeps on informing customers and demanding that those contracts happen, or forcing the investor, the disco, to go and provide those facilities to connect customers.
But it gets even trickier.
That the community provided the materials for electrification or electrifying that community does not mean that the community will now maintain it. They don't have the expertise, they don't have the control of the appliances beyond their community because there are so many things involved.
Faced with little leverage, residents are typically compelled to forfeit ownership or risk prolonged disconnection. Sunday Odunton speaks for the Association of Nigeria Electricity Distributors. He argues that many communities fail to follow procedure.
You don't just go and buy transformer without me as the disco in charge of that franchise area without my knowledge. And after buying it, and you come to me and say, give me my money back. That will not happen.
Nigeria's power sector was privatized in 2013, dividing into three main segments: privately owned generation companies, a publicly owned transmission company, and distribution companies operated through public-private partnerships. Yet, more than a decade later, the promise of steady power remains a mirage. According to former Minister of Power Bath Naji, Nigeria needs at least 100,000 megawatts to function as a viable economy. However, the country currently generates a meager 5,000 megawatts from 26 power plants. Yet, only 4,000 megawatts are transmitted and distributed. Government blames this gap on weak distribution infrastructure, but experts insist that the challenge is across the value chain.
There is an admission on the part of government that the generating companies are being owed 4 trillion naira. I don't know where they are going to get the money to pay that, to knock off that debt.
Every Nigerian is familiar with the fact that the grid has been shutting down more frequently in the last few years. And so that shows obviously that there needs to be upgrades in those systems, in those infrastructures.
Distribution companies say their hands are tied, pointing to widespread theft and vandalism as major setbacks to network investment.
Out of 20 transformers, 15 will be indebted to their local disco one way or the other. Any disco. So it's always easier to ask the service provider to provide excellent service, but at the same time, we're not asking the end users to go by their own payment obligations.
But for the power sector to work, everyone needs to pitch in.
They should write to the distribution companies, ask them to come and provide those services. Now, when they say they cannot, they should tell them that they portion to the regulation of NEC that they would want to make those investments subject to repayment. And then, if they still fail, then they can report them to the regulator and say, look, this is a responsibility to provide this service, but we are prepared based on this regulation to provide it under a clear contract. I think NEC could then sit over and force the disco to enter into a fair contract with the community.
Once you inform us and the regulator before you make that investment, you will surely get back your refund, which of course in most cases comes back in terms of giving you electricity units.
You must apply. You must get response for your application, and parties involved in the transaction must sit down and come to a consensus that, okay, this is the amount of investments you are going to bring into the network. This is the process by which I will do the refund, not necessarily cash, maybe energy credit.
Experts advise authorities to adopt local solutions to power instability.
If now states have autonomy over their electricity, and that is something that is happening on ground, then you can see how this community-based financing can work better, because then local governments could focus on energy as part of their deliverables.
The national grid may be centralized, but the last-mile burden often falls on consumers. While community-funded projects help bridge the gap, without proper enforcement and public awareness, consumers will still be left powerless. Ayuba, Iliya, Gist, Nigeria.
Interesting. Have you had to buy electricity infrastructure that should have been provided by power distribution companies? And were you compensated in any form? Share your thoughts with us on X at Just Nigeria TV. Would like to hear from you.